Hello everyone, it's Nina and welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing a somewhat belated look at all of the movies and TV shows and theater performances that I saw for the last 4 months of the year. I have around 25 things I want to talk about in this video. I'm gonna move through things as quickly as I can since there is so much to cover in this video. But I'm hoping with finishing this video, we will have completed pretty much all of my wrap-up content for 2025 and can move into all the new stuff I've been watching and reading in 2026. So with that intro out of the way, let's get right on into it. Starting off, we're going to talk about the 3 movies that we watched on Labor Day. We recently had gone to a small secondhand record and movie store and ended up picking up DVDs of all 3 of the High School Musical movies. So we decided to marathon watch them on Labor Day, and it was so fun. Honestly, no notes. These are modern classics to me. Very, very iconic, a lot of bops. I've said this to a couple of our friends, but I think the second movie is the best movie, but the third movie has the best songs. And also you can really tell the jump in quality from the second and third movie, considering the fact that the third one got a theatrical release. But these are honestly just so much fun. Because January 2026 is the 20th anniversary of the first movie coming out, yes, that makes me feel really old as well, and the fact that the first movie is set on New Year's, we decided to have our New Year's party that we co-host with our friend Kyle be High School Musical themed for this year. And I think it turned out really funny. Okay, I'm gonna go through the rest of the other content that we watched in September. This month, honestly, maybe out of all of them, is the most things that we watched in 1 month. The next movie we ended up watching was Ocean's 11. This is another one that we had a DVD that we had picked up secondhand. It was okay. I can understand why it started a franchise, and I don't know if it was because of the fact that we had previously watched Ocean's 8 earlier on in the year, that I was like, okay, well that one I just like a lot more. I feel like the camp in that one was a lot more fun, whereas all the guys in this, I was just kind of bored with. And just didn't really connect to as much as I did with the entire female cast of the Ocean's 8 movie. Yeah, it's okay. I don't actually know if we'll end up watching the other ones in the main trilogy, and we might eventually also maybe even unhaul this DVD. Okay, after that we watched Much Ado About Nothing. This one I mainly wanted to watch because there's a lot of actors in it that I really like. This was another one that's okay. I'm not the biggest Shakespeare fan, and while I feel I was able to really follow what was going on with the plot, there were also a couple plot beats that I felt obviously didn't age very well. I also kind of thought that the enemies to lovers aspect was going to be a larger part of the story, but it felt really sidelined by the main plot that I didn't really like. So glad I watched this. It actually was just a library DVD, so I don't know if I necessarily watch it again. Okay, after that we decided to watch Baz Luhrmann's The Great Gatsby. This is a movie I had not seen since college. I still quite enjoyed this. There definitely are some parts in Baz Luhrmann's direction that I'm not 100% on, in some of his weird angles and close-ups that he does sometimes, but I do feel some of the elements, even that are a little bit more anachronistic, still really fit the overall vibe and message of The Great Gatsby really well. So those don't really bother me in terms of the storytelling. So yeah, definitely enjoyed this one. I'll go through some of the Halloween themed movies they ended up watching in September. We watched Twitches 1 and 2, which I think I mentioned in some of my fall vlogs. This was a set of movies that I think my wife watched a lot when she was a kid, but I had never seen it, besides maybe one scene when I was flipping through channels and ended up on the Disney Channel. I thought the first one was really cute and definitely a good movie to watch around Halloween. The second one was definitely more generic fantasy kids movie, and I didn't really like it as much without having that Halloween focus and ambiance. Another Halloween movie that I'm so glad we ended up watching this year that is a classic from my childhood is When Good Ghouls Go Bad, which I think is based on an R.L. Stine story. I don't think it's based on a specific Goosebumps book though. This is one of the ones that did kind of scare me a little bit as a kid, and I still think kind of holds up as an adult. Has a very charming and heartfelt message, while also being scary in a kid's way. The next movie is one we actually went to the theaters to see, which was Him. This was one of our most anticipated movies for the year. I think this movie has gotten a lot of flack, people acting like it's the worst movie that ever came out, when it's really actually not that bad. I just feel this one kind of failed from being overhyped for the wrong reasons. There's a lot of really interesting things you can do with the concept of a sports horror movie, and it ended up being a little bit too much style over substance. However, I still did enjoy it, and I wouldn't completely write off this director. I also think that the performances of the main 2 actors were really good. So I don't think it's valid to completely write this one off, as many people have. Okay, the last of the things I started watching in September, but actually continued on for the rest of the year, is I ended up doing a Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters rewatch, kind of in conjunction to the watch-along streams that Dylan from Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything has been doing on his Twitch channel. I don't talk about this a lot, but Dylan is one of my personal friends. We met through Yu-Gi-Oh! And just have like continued to bond. I'm really also good friends with his wife Ivrea, who has commented and watches a lot of my videos, so she's probably watching this one as well. Anyway, I think Dylan is a really great guy, and I really love watching his Twitch streams, so I highly recommend you guys go ahead and check those ones out. In 2025, he watched all of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monster series, and rewatching the series was so much fun. It made me feel like so connected with Yu-Gi-Oh!, which I hadn't been in a really long time, despite this being like kind of one of my like main fandoms. We were watching primarily the sub through the like Twitch watch-alongs, but then on my own time, I was also watching a lot of the dubbed episodes that obviously have a lot of like nostalgia factor for me specifically, having like seen those episodes like come out when I was a kid. But honestly, it's such a classic and legitimately a good series. I just like overall love Yu-Gi-Oh! So much. Okay, I'm gonna move now into some of the stuff that we watched in October. The first thing that we ended up doing is we went to see the touring production of Six when it came to Philly. This was definitely a like very pivotal moment for 2025 because me and my wife have become obsessed with the Six soundtrack since seeing it live. Like honestly, how is a soundtrack that I've probably listened to 20 or more times make me want to cry every single time at the last song? It is really, really great, and also a very accessible point for if you want to get into Broadway theater because it's only a one-act show and kind of is in the format of almost like a concert. Not too much like extraneous plot stuff going on. Very simplistic in the set design, and there's not a lot of characters to follow. And pretty much every single one of the songs is a complete bop. So this is definitely one of my like favorite pieces of media that we consumed in 2025. Next, we watched, in honor of it being October, Halloween Town. I have not seen this movie, I think, since I was very, very young, and watching it now was like very fun and nostalgic. Next movie we watched after that, which I think I also talked about in a fall vlog, is we watched the original Mummy. I had never seen this movie. As I mentioned in the vlog where I watched this, it was a movie that my parents, when I was a kid, they were going to stay up and watch it, but they had me go to bed because they thought it would be too scary. While I can't confirm it probably was too scary for me as a child, there also were a couple scenes that were still pretty gross as an adult. Pretty much everything related to like the scarabs is still like a little gross, body horror-esque. I really like this one. I definitely would consider watching some of the sequels. I'm sure like the later sequels are not very good, but I think people still do like the second one. But it definitely wasn't like a standout, like new favorite of mine. Okay, after this, I think in honor of having us watched Great Gatsby the previous month, we wanted to watch another Baz Luhrmann movie, and we ended up watching Romeo and Juliet. This one is okay. I remember watching this, I think, in one of my like high school English classes after we read Romeo and Juliet. I like the modern setting, and I feel like, again, the world building aspects are work in like service of the original story, but still, I'm not the biggest Shakespeare fan. And the plot of Romeo and Juliet kind of overall is a little stupid. So I like this movie, but it's not one that I'm like going out of my way to watch again. Okay, next, we're gonna talk about another movie that I saw in the theaters with my wife. As like a little date night, we went to go see Begonia, which is the newest Yorgos Lanthimos movie. This movie, I actually was pleasantly surprised by how much I liked. It was one I was a little hesitant going into, kind of similarly with my experience in seeing Eddington. And weirdly, it has a lot of like similar themes to Eddington. This movie actually honestly felt like if Yorgos Lanthimos and Ari Aster worked on a movie together. And then lo and behold, I learned after the fact that Ari Aster did produce this movie. You can kind of see his touch in some of the elements of the story. Although I do think it's definitely a lot less weird in terms of like the actual dialogue compared to other Yorgos Lanthimos movies. So if you've kind of been put off in watching The Favorite or The Lobster or stuff like that, I think you might still enjoy this one, since it is very different from his other movies. Okay, after this, we watched Weapons. My wife ended up getting a like DVD from the library. She had gone to see it when it first came out in theaters and really, really liked it, and thought that she could kind of tell me when like the jump scares or really gross parts were, so that we could then watch it together. And I actually did really, really like this. I definitely looked away at some of the really gross scenes, but I honestly thought it was really good. I don't want to spoil it, but there were definitely a couple scenes that were so funny. I was like outwardly laughing so loud. So very scary, but also very funny. Then we ended up watching Hereditary again. I know I mentioned in a previous one of these wrap-ups that I watched Hereditary for the first time. We ended up watching it again because Christina's sister was in town and she had never seen the movie, so we ended up watching it with her. Again, very iconic. Probably one of like the best modern horror movies. Kind of started the like art horror subgenre. The next movie I ended up watching was one of my most anticipated movies of 2025, and that was Frankenstein by Guillermo del Toro. I ended up not being able to go see this in theaters, so we just ended up watching it on Netflix. I kind of think that I had overhyped this in my head, that I didn't love it as much as I wanted to. I also do feel like me having the background of the book made me like it a little less. which is maybe an unpopular opinion. Obviously, set design, costuming, character design, like all of that was so beautiful, as is pretty much every Guillermo del Toro movie. I can't really put my finger on it in terms of like what I didn't like or what I could really change. I do think it maybe is just like there's a couple scenes from the book that I remember playing out very differently in my head, that the fact that it wasn't the same as the movie made me like it less than the version I had created for myself. I do think there were a couple changes that were done really well, like everything relating to the monster and the old man. And I thought all the performances were really, really good. Okay, the next movie I want to talk about is Beau is Afraid by Ari Aster. This movie is so baffling and honestly made me say what the fuck out loud multiple times. I feel like there are a lot of things I see when people review movies where they're like, oh, this movie was crazy. And I'm like, I think I know what weird things are. And then when I watch those movies, I'm like, yeah, I guess that's kind of weird. This is actually weird. Like, this is a really, really bizarre movie. I think I might have mentioned this in the previous video, but I often will read the full Wikipedia summaries of a movie before I see it, just because I tend to not like jump scares, not like really gross triggering things. I want to like kind of like know what I'm getting into before I watch a movie. This is one of the ones where when I was reading the Wikipedia summary, I out loud said, what the fuck? And I was showing the Wikipedia summary to my sister-in-law, and as she was reading it, I could like see in her face confusion and fear and what the fuck. And she hadn't even gotten to the part that I was going what the fuck at. So yeah, this movie is a kind of unpleasant experience. At the same time, I was laughing at a lot of parts of it. It kind of does feel like a movie that maybe only Ari Aster could make and pull it off as well as he does. A movie I'm glad I watched, but I'm also like, fine, never watching again. Okay, next we're going to the kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. We end up going into the theaters around Thanksgiving to see Wicked for Good. Is this movie amazing? No comment. I do think the first Wicked is better, but I do think this one is still really good. It really does feel like this movie is Glinda's movie. And honestly, this is probably the one that Ariana Grande should get her Oscar nomination for. Okay, now we're moving into everything I saw in December. There's not a ton in this list because we were very busy with the holidays. The first one is a TV show that I, as well as probably every other person online, was watching in December of 2025, and that, of course, is Heated Rivalry. Not to say that I feel uniquely qualified to talk about the show, but as someone that, like, mostly only reads queer romance, this is actually a series I had not previously heard of. I actually think I had considered reading a different Rachel Reed book, but sports romances and hockey romances are just like not really my subgenre. However, now in 2026, I am absolutely going to be reading the entirety of the Game Changers series because I loved the TV show adaptation so much. Like when I saw all of the drama surrounding the fact that episode 5, I'll Believe in Anything, got a perfect 10 out of 10 score on IMDb, an honor that is only shared with Ozymandias from Breaking Bad, another show that me and my wife absolutely love. I was like, is it really going to be that good? Oh my god, it is that good. I absolutely love the final 2 episodes in the series. I think they're so amazing. There's one particular scene in episode 5 that I literally cannot watch without having like my hand over my mouth in absolute shock at how good it is. I think it's great, and I'm so incredibly, happy for like everyone in the production that has like really gotten so much praise and adoration online for this series. And like probably everyone else, I'm also waiting with bated breath for the second season to come out. Okay, let me talk about the other 2 movies that I saw in 2025 so we can kind of leave off on a high note with the theater performance I saw at the very end of the year. But in December, we also decided to watch A Cure for Wellness. I honestly love looking through a list of this because you can really see like the ricocheting of all of me and my wife's interests. Anyway, this was just a random horror movie that I think we ended up watching because Dane DeHaan is in it. And we had previously watched this year Kill Your Darlings and Chronicle, which both have him as the main actor. Anyway, just kind of randomly found this one, ended up watching the library DVD, and it was definitely something. I feel like there was a lot of interesting concepts, but I personally also find it a little too like gratuitous and too gross for me to like want to do any deeper analysis. Like any elements that I could potentially get from like a rewatch or like by doing a lot of like snooping around on Reddit to like learn more about the movie doesn't like take away from the gross parts of this movie that I just don't really like and just like don't really feel have a lot of like justification for why they're in the story. Definitely an interesting movie, but not really one that I really enjoyed. And the last movie that I watched in 2025 is K-Pop Demon Hunters. Yes, it took me like this long to finally watch this movie. We ended up watching it over Christmas when we were in Chicago, watching it with my sister-in-law and their partner. It's a lot of fun. It's definitely like a kids movie, and you can like really see some of the kids movie elements come out. But the songs like are also like all absolute bops, and the character designs are really good. I also like the fact that it ends on like a pretty like definitive like closure with like the main plot. There is a lot of stuff that you could go into. Like I really want to know a lot more about Rumi's mom. So while there isn't a lot of like sequel bait, there is a lot of ways that you could do in terms of like different forms of prequels for the series, which I think they might actually be doing at some point in the next like year or two. And since I like the songs, I'll probably check that one out when it comes out. A theater show we ended up seeing in November was the touring production of Hadestown. I have to be honest, I was originally planning to go see the Broadway production of this at some point, but I think now having seen the touring production, I'm like kind of fine not going to go to Broadway to see the same show. This is one I was kind of pleasantly surprised by. I'd only heard like 1 or 2 songs before this, but I ended up really, really loving it when we saw it live. Not necessarily one that I really like latched onto the soundtrack as much as I have with other musicals that we've seen, but I am really, really happy that we did get the opportunity to go see it. Okay, the last piece of media I wanted to talk about for this year was over Christmas we also went to see Phantom of the Opera when it was playing in Chicago, and this was a perfect way to end off the year. I really, really do love Phantom. I previously watched the like 25th anniversary pro shot recording, as well as also the movie, which I kind of like more than I think a lot of people do. But seeing it live was so amazing. Especially it kind of has like a show within a show that helps you feel like really immersed, like you are actually watching one of the operas that they are performing in the world of the musical. I also thought all of the different sets were so incredibly beautiful and very inventive with like the things that they did. I also felt like in seeing it live, there were different songs that I ended up like latching onto and really enjoying. All in all, really amazing, and I'm so glad that we ended up going to see it. So that's a look at all of the movies, TV shows, and theater performances that we ended up seeing in 2025. I've really enjoyed filming these videos and also tracking and creating like a full list of everything I see in a year. As I mentioned in other videos, movies and TV shows have become a really, really good like bonding activity since it's something I can do with my wife. So it's just been really fun, like cutting every single week, picking out a movie or two from our library and then going home and watching them, or making progress on TV shows I'm really excited for, and going to see different like shows on and off Broadway. I'm definitely going to do more of these videos in 2026, so stay tuned for those. And yeah, that's going to be it for this video. If you guys enjoyed this, consider liking, commenting, or subscribing if you aren't already. Consider following me on the Storygraph if you'd like to see my reading updates in real time, as well as on my Bookstagram, which is linked in the description. I hope you guys all have a wonderful day and a great start to 2026, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!